Good afternoon, and thank you for accepting our invitation to this press conference. As you're all aware, over the past 5 days, the JPS, the OUR, the government, the media, and the public at large have been engaged in what we would describe as healthy and welcome discourse on the problem of electricity theft and our efforts to stem its growth. Today we've asked you here so that we can frame that discourse more precisely and to give you the opportunities to pose additional questions and to make additional comments, ultimately designed to air details which can help get us to sustainable solutions for this problem which is plaguing our country. My name is Cherie Martin, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Customer and Corporate Services at JPS. I'm joined at the head table by President and CEO Kelly Tomlin and Gary Barrow, our Senior Vice President for Energy Delivery. We're going to start first with a presentation by Kelly and Gary, after which we'll take your questions.
Members of the media, my JPS family, thank you, Cherie. Good afternoon. Cherie started by saying that we were here because of some of the recent attention JPS has received from the media and the many questions, and that's true. She also said we were here because there were a lot of questions that we haven't had the opportunity to answer, and we wanted hopefully a more full discourse. And I do want to thank the media because there was a lot of requests that we had for different shows and different interviews, and we just couldn't arrange it. So we thought this would be more efficient. And that really is the surface of why we're here. But I think leaders do one thing more often than not. They continue to probe a little deeper on the question of why. And when I started to think, why do I want to do this? Why are we here? You know, I was reminded of a couple of things. The first one, a very recent event, was the fact that there was a gentleman last night that decided he would go crab fishing. And he went crab fishing, a fun and productive activity. But what that gentleman didn't know was that somebody, in an attempt to steal electricity, had rigged a wire across the ground and in the culvert. That gentleman is no longer with us today. And that happens a lot, but today it's even more poignant because it's today, because it happens to be a cousin of one of our employees. That's one of the reasons we're here. We're here because right now, across Jamaica, and every one of our customer service centers, there's somebody presenting a bill to one of my customer service reps saying, wow, I don't understand this. And they're very upset and anxious, usually very anxious. My bill's $60,000. I only have, a little TV, a couple of lights, a little refrigerator. How's my bill $60,000? Then when we go to investigate, we see that, she's just not supporting her little house. She's supporting 5, 6, 7 houses around her, but she's the only person paying. We're here today because the fuel bill does continue to rise. And 600,000 of us are committed to that and are paying for that, but about 200,000 of us aren't. So we're going to present you with many facts and figures today, but I hope you see underneath it the reason that we are here goes beyond the facts and figures, that it really involves the lives, the safety, the well-being, and ultimately the justice in Jamaica. A lot's been said about unjustness and unfairness and really making the good pay for the bad, but I hope after we're done that we all can agree that the good are paying for the bad every day all across Jamaica. So let's get to the facts and figures. I know you've heard them, but we all love them. As I said, we have about 600,000 paying customers and about 200,000, as we like to call them nicely, consumers. And let's start calling them what they are. They're people stealing. And the reason I want to be really clear is because I think maybe our language has become so nuanced that it no longer shocks us. Nothing bothers us anymore because we say it so nicely. Non-technical theft. consumers of electricity. It's not consumers, it's non-technical, it's people stealing electricity. And I know that we all grew up, I hope, in the same kind of church I grew up in. And, you know, I heard the Ten Commandments, and one was clearly, and is often stated in my church that I frequent here, is that thou shalt not steal. But, you know, when we walk by it, the evidence every day, and we do nothing, we say nothing, we become immune to it. Martin Luther King said when we quit talking about in real terms the things that matter. We cease to exist in some way, and I think that's where we are today, that those numbers we become immune to them. 200,000 people stealing, 17% of all electricity produced gone to theft. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we all understand a couple of things. This isn't one socioeconomic class, isn't one geographic area. It is across Jamaica and across socioeconomic classes. There's been some statements that this is an elitist move, that we really want to prey on the most vulnerable. And what we want to do is protect the most vulnerable. And here's why. Right now, we are spending every month, and I want you to remember these two numbers, $1.3 billion to buy fuel that is stolen. $1.3 billion. You know and I know we can't afford that. That's about 18% of our entire fuel bill. Now, the numbers are not going to add up perfectly because last year we spent $11 billion, and it's really influenced by foreign exchange because I know you know what happened last year, and that really impacted it because remember, we have to pay for this very expensive fuel in U.S. dollars. So not are they only stealing the fuel, they're really impacting our foreign exchange problem and making it worse. And it's made even worse because what we do know for our paying customers, and picture the ones I've told you about, the ones struggling in my office to pay their bills, the ones running when they get their due date to make sure they don't get disconnected, the ones that have excitedly paid early so they could get the early payment incentive plan. I want you to picture those folks because those folks are conserving. They're trying their best, they're buying LED lights, they're plugging out, they're changing out the refrigerators. But the 200,000 or so people stealing electricity are doing none of those things. In fact, they're using more. And our estimates are that they use about 3 times the amount that our paying customers are used. And of course, they're right now not taking any measures toward conservation that we see our paying customers taking. So today, I hope we walk away with that any move that JPS has made in the recent 5 days are moves to protect our paying customers. So what is it exactly those people are suffering, our paying customers? And I would like to get on the record, a big hearty thank you to our paying customers. And as we've said before, a sense of regret and apology for our paying customers who were impacted by a recent initiative. But I will tell you that I hope after you hear Gary speak, there was a sense that, boy, when you've done everything you know and everything our experts tell us to do, and you get to a desperate spot, you start to take desperate measures. So we have 3, at least, impacts that we want you to remember. The one is higher bills. We all know this, that the fuel bill is going up, and our bills are getting higher this month only because of the fuel bill. But we know today, as we suffer and we struggle to bring on new generation, that if we did not have 200,000 people not paying anything, that we would be able to reduce our energy bills today without any capital investment or limited capital investment by 10 to 15%. Now, why don't those numbers add up? And I want to say this, and we'll say it, and I know Gary will. Every society has people that can't afford to pay, and we accept that. Those programs are usually done in a structured way where there's a needs-based test. So we always know and we always expect those numbers not to equal out because we're always going to stand ready to help the most vulnerable. So we know that the impact of theft is rising and continuing rising energy prices. We know it's unreliable supply. The comment was, how can you take your paying customers out? I said they're going out all the time, frequently, because when someone messes with our system, tries to thwart it, has throw-ups, it takes down our system. And not only that, it blows out their equipment. So their equipment's being damaged and mine is. So finally, a lot has been made about the fact this is really just a ploy for JPS's profits, and it's clear that no company can handle in excess of $45 million, what we call penalty that we can't recover. In 2012, it was $30 million US dollars, and last year even more than that, $43 million US dollars. No company can handle that, and it's true. We want JPS to be a viable, strong utility. But is it true that that is really solely motivated by profit? No. What it's motivated by, my promise to our customers, that your service is going to get more and more reliable, that we're going to bring you new and different solutions. We have a commitment to our customers that cannot be fulfilled when we're bleeding to this extent. What could I do with 43 million US dollars? A lot more lightning arresters, a lot more equipment, a lot more customer service agents. We can go on and on about that. But certainly JPS suffers, but every customer suffers when a company bleeds that way. But I don't want to back away from, we need a viable utility. Countries don't grow in a broken down grid. We need a strong grid. We need a strong utility. And I was standing before the media a year ago, and if you'll recall, there was a big ad in one of the papers, lights out. And what I said was, this is unsustainable. A utility can't keep going forward when the percentage of people paying grows less and less. And here, a year later, we are here today. So in addition to that, I think you've heard me say we have about 250 people that could be better, I think, placed, furthering our mission of bringing a solution to every Jamaican, helping you with your customer service problems. And we know we're not perfect, and I'm not going to stand behind this mic and say that. We have a lot to work to do at JPS, but boy, we could do it a lot better with those 250 people placed in their real business of providing safe and reliable electricity service. So the cost of theft is deep and wide. It impacts all of us. And I hope after you hear Gary talk about what we've done, you'll agree with me that we're at a point, and I'm pleased almost at this point, where theft is no longer an option. And I will say that over and over. I think we haven't made the strides we need to make because theft is still an option. It is an option for so many of us, and sometimes an easy option. Until we take that away, we will be standing here fighting it day and day and not winning that war against theft. And the second thing that I want you to remember as Gary comes up here is that there are solutions. There are solutions, but they're not the easy solutions, and we'll get into that in a minute. So remember, theft no longer an option. We are committed to, and we are going to find a real solution to the theft that is impacting you, me, and the entire country. Gary Barrow, my Senior Vice President, is going to take us through now what have we been doing.
Let me welcome the media, colleagues, good afternoon. The matter of the theft of electricity is always a very difficult topic for me, not only because I have direct responsibility for that at the JPS, but as I stand here as a Jamaican, it is really very worrying for me. When you consider 200,000 consumers of electricity at any point in time stealing electricity, it is perhaps the most stolen product at any point in time. 200,000 households, if we consider an average of 4 persons to each household, we're looking at close to 1 million Jamaicans actually coming face to face with electricity theft, almost normalized around it. Think of the gravity of us accepting something like that. I visit many of these communities, and it's very worrying to me when I see the children hopping across raw wires. Kelly mentioned earlier a very unfortunate incident of someone who was probably engaged in one of their favorite hobbies who got electrocuted last night and died. It is really very difficult because what we are talking about is in these homes where the children are seeing it as normal. We are talking about a generation and generations of children who believe that stealing is okay. And if they believe that stealing electricity is okay, then they are going to believe that stealing anything is okay. And I want you to understand it because it is so important. It is one of the most stolen products in Jamaica at any point in time. We as a company, we know we have a role, but it is a bigger issue. It is a socio-economic issue that requires a multi-pronged approach. We haven't underestimated the gravity of the situation. Yes, it affects our financials, but I think more importantly, it affects Jamaica. We have been doing a number of things, and we know that we have to take a multi-pronged approach to dealing with this issue. We have had hundreds of meetings in communities. One of the reasons we restructured our organization along the parish lines and along the regional lines is to move from central control and to put our people back in the field, put our people back into the community to get close to our customers, to get in touch with our customers. We go out on a daily basis. We walk the roads. We meet with the people in the communities. We have numerous meetings, hundreds and hundreds of meetings with both our customers and consumers, encouraging them to regularize, seeing, understanding their pain, understanding how we can help so that we can craft the solutions to help them. You would have seen our efforts with the removal of illegal lines. That has been a major effort, particularly over the past 2 years. We have done numerous account audits and investigations, particularly amongst our large account holders. You have heard us talk about the anti-theft meter infrastructure. These are the residential advanced metering infrastructure and the commercial advanced metering infrastructure. We have stepped back a little bit from the terminology anti-theft because we know that is really anti-resistant, theft-resistant, because we have seen technologies that worked well in other countries that does not work here in Jamaica. And we know we are all very ingenious. And we have really stepped up and recognizing that theft is a crime. We are pushing for the judicial system to deal with the matter of the theft of electricity. What are some of the activities? I have a table here just to guide you through the number of initiatives and the results of some of these initiatives. As you can see here with the CAMI installation, which is a commercial advanced metering infrastructure, we have installed over 5,000 meters. These are meters that are installed with our largest customers. Our RAMI installations, we have done over 30,000 RAMI installations. Audit and investigations, over 500,000 audits and investigations. And imagine that we have 250 people directly involved in loss control activities on a daily basis. People are going out, investigating customers, looking at buildings, and so on. As far as audits are concerned, we have put in enhanced technologies. In fact, we are putting in new technologies this year that allows us to better monitor consumption, to be better able to detect unusual activities. And we are not easing up for those customers, particularly commercial customers, who believe that they can continue to get away. Because we know that it's not only in the red zones theft is taking place. We have found large customers. Yesterday we found one pharmacy, you'd have seen it in the newspaper, that was stealing electricity. And so we are stepping up. We have new software where we are able to remotely monitor these customers, look out for significant variations and exceptions. And so if you are stealing electricity, let me tell you that we will find you commercial customers. We have, as I mentioned before, we have a strike force out there now. You'd have seen some stepped up activities yesterday in certain areas in St. Catherine. It is just really pretty amazing when you go into these communities and, you know, the level of theft, the amount of wires, you know, when it comes to safety, when it comes to reliability, it is really, really frightening. This is a serious problem that the country faces. In 2012, we had 76 arrests. We stepped up our efforts in a significant way in 2013, and we had over 1,200 arrests. And despite all of this, last month, we had our largest rolling average losses as a percentage of our revenues. And this is really frightening. What we are saying is that despite all of these actions, despite all of this effort, despite trying almost everything that we can do, the theft of electricity continues to escalate. It is at crisis proportion now. And when you reach into in a desperate situation, you have to take desperate actions. As I mentioned, we have actually regularized over 22,000 users, and we have spent over $34 million invested in the system to help us to mitigate against the theft of electricity. We have implemented the RAMI solution in over 22 communities. And if you think of the cost of implementing these solutions, they are not cheap relative to what the normal cost of implementing a normal meter. Before we implemented the RAMI solution, the average energy loss in many of these communities were 75%. And just think of that, one community where the energy being delivered, 75% of the energy being delivered, the oil that you have to pay for and that Jamaica has to pay for is being stolen. After the RAMI installation, right after the RAMI installation, which is what happens in many countries, we are down to only 10% theft. Within 6 months, we are up to 40%. As they sit down and they figure out how to get around the system. And the 40% is increasing. Every month it increases more as new ways are found to go around the system. We are in a crisis. We have one particular example of a community that we are working in right now. It's Boulevard, we call it 710 because that is a feeder that is associated with that particular area. It includes the area of Seaward, Waterhouse, and Olympic Gardens. And we have had numerous meetings with the community, consultations with the community. We estimate in that community alone over 6,000 illegal users of customers and only 3,200 legal users. 2 million kilowatt hours being lost every month. Kelly mentioned earlier that when you are stealing electricity, you have no incentive to conserve. So understand, 2 to 3 times, you're using 2 to 3 times as much electricity as the normal customer is using. And you are paying for it. JPS is paying for that. The country is paying for that. 42%, when you think 42% of our customers use less than 100 kilowatt hours per month, and those who are stealing are using close to 300 kilowatt hours per month. And here you can get a depiction graphically of how the increase in theft has happened over the past 10 years. At one point, we were only 8% in 2003. Today, we are over 17%, and it continues to go up. As you can see, in the past 2 years, the gradient has actually increased. So we are actually having an increase in the growth rate, and this is really worrying. So how did we get to the energy limiting strategy? I think you're there in your mind already. We are in a desperate position. Jamaica is in a desperate position. And this is about the future of Jamaica. We have tried everything else. And the losses continue to increase. We go into these communities and it is not making a difference. Customers are paying more. Safety is a real issue. A lot of these paying customers in these communities, they call me regularly. They are suffering because the reliability in these areas are compromised. In one community alone, in 1 week, we had to change 3 transformers Every time those transformers go out, when they are overloaded by the thieves, we have to go in and change those transformers. In some of these areas, by the time you get to the end of the line, you're getting 60, 70 volts. Imagine the impact on your paying customers and their equipment. That is what we are fighting. The viability of JPS itself is being questioned. Last year, we had qualified accounts. Our lenders are concerned about the viability of JPS. We can't invest if we aren't making money because the thieves are taking our money. We can't invest in giving you a more reliable service. The country simply cannot afford to let this situation continue. It is not just about JPS. Theft of electricity cannot be an option if we are going to be serious about this. We focused our efforts on the high theft feeders. And the communities we chose recently were areas that had between 70 and 90% theft. In some of the communities, we had up to 90% of the electricity was being stolen. JPS actually measures the amount of energy going into the community against what is being billed. And that is how we know what is being stolen. It wasn't selected on demographics. Yes, we know that the theft of electricity is all over Jamaica. But there are certainly areas in Jamaica where it is more profound, where it is more significant. And those are the areas we focused on. Not on demographics, on the amount of electricity that is being lost. The communities we actually chose were, as you see here, and we internally, we are familiar with the feeder numbers. Again, these are just the distribution lines that go into these communities. But there are sections of Jonestown, Seaward Avenue, Olympic Gardens, as I had mentioned before, Bay Farm, Waterhouse, Clinking Avenue. In Jonestown, up to 89% of the electricity is being stolen. Hunts Bay, covering Trenchtown, Denhamtown, and Rema. The average was actually Central Village also, where we did an operation yesterday. 73%. What next? Kelly, can I turn this over to you?
Yeah, sure. Unless you want to. Okay, what's next? One thing I can tell you for sure, that JPS stands steadfast in the idea that we are not going to stand back and let this happen anymore. While this initiative may not have worked, we're going to continue to pursue bold initiatives that finally take care of this problem. We are going to continue on what Gary has described, but we do believe this calls for a new solution, and we'll talk a little bit about that. What do I mean? Everybody has a role to play, and what we do know, because we've studied this in country after country, that it does take a collaborative effort with government. And what do I mean by that? Number one, stricter legislation. And I have a couple examples here. And so we won't run this, afoul of this constant criticism that we only focus on, India or Africa. Let's go to Houston, Texas. Everybody will agree that that's a first world country, right? Well, I don't know. I've been to Houston a lot. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I think what's important to note there is that when an electricity problem, theft problem showed up, look at the measures we took. It's a felony now if you steal electricity, $1,500. You go to jail. They have a dedicated police force that handles, and a court system that handles electricity theft. They treat it like a real crime. In India, mandatory prison sentences for thieves of electricity. So we see that there is a stronger push, a stronger discipline where we say theft is a crime. Now remember, you can go on TV now and say, I'm stealing electricity. Everybody just shakes their head. I can go to schools and kids tell me every day, Miss Kelly, I am thieving the light. It's not okay, man, you're stealing the light. And then people can march almost arrogantly to say, how dare you tell me I can't thief the light? So when we think how much the work, how big the job is that we have to do, it's huge. So when you're trying to enact such a huge change, it requires huge measures. We've tried the little measures. They don't work. So we'd like to look at examples, and there's more examples where people have come together. And this is the key, ladies and gentlemen, for everybody, the media, the public, when we all get together and decide, enough is enough. We're not taking it anymore. And I know in my heart, once we get to that space, we will deal with this problem. We will have harsher penalties. We will have a special force, and we'll treat it like the crime it is. So what else do we want to do? Because we know that there's just not a stick. Because we know a couple of different things, and these two are very heartfelt, that in every society there's a group of people that just can't pay for it. And what we're asking for today is let's all agree on what our policy is. Now, is there a policy that everyone is entitled to electricity? Yes or no? If it is, how long are they required? Or do we decide that they are entitled to that? And if we decide that as a society, we have to recognize the very hard fact that everyone cannot afford electricity. And let's come away with an agreement that perhaps we're going to help the poor in a structured approach, in an honest approach, to have a needs-based test, to come in and say we'll treat it like PATH, but we decide the policy together, and then we decide that those of us who can are going to help those who can't. Because there's a conversation going on now that says, well, we should have JPS pay or subsidize. Now, make no mistake, JPS itself, well, we are now, aren't really the major subsidizers, right? All of you are. So all of our paying customers and all of us have to agree, which most societies do, that we will help those who absolutely can't. Because they're old, because they have disability, whatever, that they absolutely can't pay. Now, what we do know, that too will require supportive legislation. But what we also know, between the group of people that absolutely cannot pay and those who just are, I don't care what it costs, you can make it cheap, you can make it pretty, I'm just not paying. Because zero, free is better than any cost, right? But you know what I've found, because when I talk to people in these communities, that there's a great expanse between those extremes. A lot of people are saying, you know, I could afford something, but it's very hard to manage. I haven't learned about conservation because I still have a 10, 20-year-old refrigerator. I still have fans that are pointed to, and I wish I had some of my pictures, at a freezer, and that's how I'm cooling my house. So we know that there's a lot of education that can help. So what we are proposing is a multi-pronged approach. Stiffer penalties, greater education, a community-based approach, and you'll see a little bit about that in our community renewal program. We propose at the OUR, but I think we want to take now a step back and see if we have been complete enough. But in that, again, a subsidized rate, not a flat rate. We have up to 200 kilowatt hours, but we do believe that's very generous when you think that 42% of our public today uses less than 100 kilowatt hours. Whatever the number is, let's all agree to that. Not a flat rate, but at a rate that's subsidized for what we call lifeline or the basic necessity usage. And facilitate what really is the problem. A lot of the problem is because whatever price, people can't afford it. So let's take some of that money we're throwing down the toilet and use it for job skills training, job creation, because we know there's two sides of this coin, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There's this idea of affordability, yes, and being able to pay for anything. So we want to attack it from both sides of the problem, and everybody benefits. Consumers who are not on the grid, I have to believe most of them want to be legit. As Gary said, I don't believe most of us want to teach our children crimes or sin or whatever you want to call it. We want to be a model. So let's come up with different solutions. Now, I am passionate about conservation, not just for theft, and it's a little bit off topic because I'm almost scared to say this in the context of this discussion because I don't believe prepaid meters apply to only people who are stealing. We do know that it is a way to conserve, a way to help us all manage our bills. And in Dominica, for instance, everybody has a prepaid meter. What we do know, and the numbers vary, that from our phone usage, from Digicel and from Lime, that a great percentage, I've heard everything from 97% on down to 80%, are prepaid. And what we do know is that seems to be manageable way to pay your bill. So we're excited that we now have prepaid meters. We've We tried one pilot. That didn't go so well, so we're trying another one in June. We need to lobby the OUR to make this happen. So as you can see, we need the government. We need all of us to agree. We need the MPs. We need the pulpit, and we need the OUR to decide that, yes, it may not look what the utility usually does, because the utility usually doesn't get involved in those discussions, but this is where we are. And to decide once and for all, we're not going to continue on the same old path because we feel comfortable with that path. We feel comfortable with anti-theft meters because we are going to have to dig deeper than that. And I leave you with this because this is really a big part of the problem and the reason it's come to this crescendo. Because when people were stealing in 2002, the fuel they were stealing was 7.1 cents a kilowatt hour, and as I understand, the Jamaican dollar wasn't subjected to such a devaluation. So now you see what they're stealing is 22 cents a kilowatt hour. And I want to remind everybody of that. What we steal or what is stolen, for the most part, is oil. The oil that we really don't touch in any great way. We take the money and we give it to Petrojam. But when something triples in price, the theft has triple the impact. And so I always like to show that we're talking about, for the most part, the cost of fuel. And I'll leave you with this. While we're working on this very, very important initiative, we have to remember that the cost of electricity is just as important. We know that lower cost energy is part of the solution, and as we make the price of electricity lower, we make it more and more affordable for, I hope, more than 200,000 people who are stealing. And so what JPS is discussing now with the government is the idea that we really should be allowed to replace the generation units that we're pouring millions and millions of US dollars into for little benefit. If you think about Hunts Bay right now, needs to be retired. It's been out on an extended outage, about $6 million US dollars. So many man hours going into Hunts Bay, when in fact it should be going into the replacement of our generation. And I think we're at the point where we do have to make some hard decisions and say, we need to take steps now for lower generation. We need to take steps now to decrease the theft of our electricity. We need real solutions now, insisting on realism. And I'll leave you with another quote from Martin Luther King. You know, the measure of man isn't when things are all nice and happy, you know, anybody can do that. The measure of a man is when it's challenging and controversial. And I think now it's time for all of us to decide, you know, where do you stand? Are we standing for solutions? Or are we going to stand on the fairy tale we've been living with the last few years? Thank you very much.